When you start college, that's the time when you have the chance to experiment, when you have the chance to open yourself up to new things, when you can discover who you are and who you might become.
Tell me one thing.
Yes.
Is my daughter going to have a job and she's not going to come back home after it's done?
The very concept of the institution of higher learning is about to be broken. All of these institutions have made immense contributions to the history of our democracy. And if you cannot have a democracy without an educated citizenry, you want to see as many citizens as possible get as much education as possible.
The philanthropists of the Gilded Age gave us the idea of mass higher education as a basic human right. Peter Cooper was this industrialist who believed in education as free as water and air. He founded the Cooper Union, a school of industrial arts and design in New York City, with the idea that it would be available to people, no matter what their background, to study useful and practical arts. But today, the Cooper Union is one of the last examples of a free higher education institution in the country.
A full scholarship for every enrolled student is the current mission statement of Cooper Union.
Peter Cooper wanted the school to be accessible to the working class, to women, to people of color. I come from a lower middle class family. My parents told me about Cooper, and when I found out, I was obsessed. I didn't even think about going anywhere else.
Nowadays, so much is against this 19th century model of a free education. Ideologically, financially, it's ancient.
When John Barucha, the current president, came into office, he announced to the Cooper community that we are running a large deficit and that tuition for the first time in 154 years would be on the table. The current administration is trying to say that education as a right is not something that we should be focusing on.
Being free, the financial model is extremely complicated. You know, you look at the financial statements and you can see an extraordinarily large deficit. I think Peter Cooper would have wanted us, if we had to talk about tuition, to be able to talk about it.
We all acknowledge that we're in a financial strait right now, but the administration and the board fail to understand how tuition is going to destroy the school.
The administration must publicly affirm colleges commitment to free education.
President Barucha has come from tuition charging colleges, and he thinks that we should become like other colleges. It's covered by normal kinds of words like sustainability.
I'm here before you because the very survival of this institution is at stake. We do not have a sustainable budget.
If you want free education, how are you going to structure it? I believe it's not compatible with small class size, highly interpersonal interaction, and with providing good compensation to people, and I believe in providing good compensation.
The president makes in excess of $700,000 as total compensation. At a school of only 1,000 students in tight financial times, one would have thought there would have been some proportionality.
I believe the president of Harvard makes $899,000, and she's overseeing 12,000 faculty, 21,000 students, and a $30 billion endowment.
She doesn't have a fraction of the problem we have. Not a fraction of the problems we have.
Apparently, we are the Harvard of Astor Place.
I don't think that the model of free education doesn't work. There's all sorts of things that got us into this mess, and it wasn't the cost of educating the students.
most of higher education believes in growth at all costs, growing their way out of difficulty. And that becomes rather problematic when you are building a building at about $1,000 a square foot, which is more than a luxury hotel. It's possible to have downsized, as Cooper Union has done in 150 years of ups and downs in the market, but that was not the decision that was made.
Do you think it was wise to invest in hedge funds and to use the money borrowed in the $175 million loan for that purpose?
You know, I'm not an investment person. I mean, I'm good at budgets, but I'm not an investment person. Were they risky decisions? Well, you know, one can ask if they were or not. But there is no question that loan is a challenge for the institution to pay back.
Cooper Union is faced with a mortgage payment of $10 million a year. It's a terrible irony that an institution which was supposed to get people out of debt gets into that kind of debt itself.
The idea that Cooper Union would think about charging tuition really seemed like such a huge betrayal and a bellwether of where education is. Students are not seen as having a right to their education, and institutions sort of feel free to continue to raise the price. What's happening to higher education in this country? Why is it seen as being the province of the rich and the rich alone? People are ignoring all of the functions that education has served throughout our history as a public good.
Certain economic truths have become self-evident. Among these, the right to a good education.
Right after the Second World War, the GI Bill was passed, which made it possible for men who would never have been allowed to walk onto a college campus except perhaps as members of the custodial staff or as delivery boys to actually walk through the gates as students.
Over 2 million veterans took advantage of the GI Bill. This was an opportunity that was free, given by the government, and it made a difference to the American middle class.
That expansion of the franchise of higher education was really so unprecedented, and it led directly to the Higher Education Act of 1965, creating the federal student aid programs.
This law means that a high school senior can apply to any college and not be turned away because his family is poor.
But the rug was pulled out from under students in the 1970s. We shifted from seeing education as a public good to seeing it exclusively as a private good. Conservative governors, especially Governor Reagan of California, had really run on the idea that higher education was a wasteful way to spend taxpayer money. Governor Reagan actually said the state should not subsidize intellectual curiosity. And he ran for president later on a promise to disband the Department of Education.
Certain advisors started to say that anything of a private advantage should be paid for.
The word free is one of the most misused words. We speak of free education. Education isn't free, it costs money.
If this is something that is going to be good for individuals to get a job and earn more money, they should finance it and make the investment themselves.
We need to keep government on the sidelines. Let the people develop their own skills, solve their own problems.
We stopped expanding the franchise of higher education, graduation rates stopped rising, and access for the poor to higher education started going down. In the 1970s, a Pell Grant was more than enough to pay for tuition at an average state institution. But today, a Pell Grant pays for a fraction of tuition. This led to the growth of the student loan industry, which ended up being the largest source of money for all of tuition. The student loan program was never intended to be this large.
We just hit an awful milestone. Our nation's combined student loan debt has now hit $1 trillion. It's now larger than credit card debt in this country.
The average American student now graduates more than $25,000 in debt.